The Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, has new telework guidance for federal employees in response to the growing interest in remote and telework options. The supplemental guidance will give agencies resources to support those alternative work options for their employees. Kiran Ahuja is the director of OPM. Kiran, welcome. It's so nice to have you.
Nice to be here. Thank you so much.
So give us a brief overview of what the new guidance is from OPM on telework and remote work.
Sure. Well, as you can imagine, we're in kind of unprecedented times about how we're thinking about work, especially really being in a maximum telework posture within the federal government for, goodness, 18, 19 months now. And so I think, we're now in a place where we can say, at one point, and I'll be a person kind of in this role, whereas a manager, we didn't think it was possible to manage people, in a telework fashion, and we wanted to see people kind of right there in our offices, and things have changed so drastically, and we wanted to take that into consideration, that we're really in a new world and space, really as we talk about future of work. So this guidance or guide is really a comprehensive 60-page plus document, because we know our HR folks in government want all the details.
It's got to be 60 pages.
It's a one-stop shop of all of the information there. But what it does do is say, listen, we were able to do this in a time of, an emergency, national emergency. We've learned a lot of good things about how we can do this work. We know it fits with the lifestyle, the works, workplace responsibilities as well as family responsibilities. We know this is what our employees want. And so this guide more than ever actually leans into that we should really be, promoting liberal telework. And one thing this guide also does is actually start talking about remote work. That has not been the case in the federal government. And so I just think it's really this idea and concept that we're talking about, not just in the federal government, but the private sector, which is the future of work. And so a part of that guide is also a future of work website that we're putting out. So we, as the largest employer in the country, not only want to be a model of what this looks like and know that I think we've realized our workers are important in the pandemic, and we need to support them in the sense of the whole person that we bring. And so how do we do that?
And when you say remote work, that's kind of like permanent telework. That's somebody living somewhere completely different and not coming into the office at
and
all.
if you think about it, it does expand the government's applicant, pool.
You don't have to live in D.C.
You
or
don't have to
wherever
live.
the
Well, in fact,
agency is.
85% of the federal workforce lives outside of D.C. But what it does do is there are opportunities in rural parts of the country. We have a new regulation out there that is also a pathway for military spouses when they're often moving with their spouses, and so really being able to have a career that they can do remotely. So I think it just really upends and really helps us think more expansively.
But Kiran, why now? We've been doing this, you said, for a year and a half.
Yeah,
so why the guidance now?
Well, it's interesting. We kind of, when the Telework Act came out in 2010, I think we kind of putted along around, the number of individuals who were teleworking. Again, this idea from managers to really get their head around, okay, can we still feel productive? Can I hold ourselves accountable, both to the agency and to Congress, about how to do that? And I think that we realized that we can. We went from less than 10% telework to more than 50%, and the government's been functioning. So I just think it created this shift. But for the pandemic, we would not be here.
I wonder what you've heard from federal employees about this new flexible environment.
Well, I think that folks are a little bit all over the place, but I think there are many individuals and employees who don't want to be in the office 5 days a week. And, if we think about the commute, if we think about how we want to really lean into a more eco-friendly work environment. So it does also help us, it really does really push the conversation also on the federal physical footprint that we have. And I know the GSA administration has talked on the Hill about, a number of leases coming available in the coming years. So it's just truly redefining the workspace as well as the workplace.
So Kiran, this is guidance, it's not a mandate.
Yeah.
So how does that work? How much flexibility do individual agencies have to implement this?
There's quite a bit of flexibility. I mean, I think, again, we understand that agencies, the federal government, 2 million plus employees, and lots of different roles. So not every position is going to fit with a maximum telework posture. So I think there has to be that flexibility. We also know that more than 50% of our federal workforce actually shows up on the job every day because that's a part of their role. So I think it's those equities that we have to be thinking about, and the flexibility is important. But I think our leaders understand, in order to be competitive, and we absolutely have a huge mandate, we need to be competing with the private sector. Oftentimes they feel like they're competing with each other and other agencies. So,
I wonder about cost of living adjustments. Now that we're talking about remote, what if you're not in a very expensive area like DC and you're living in somewhere much less expensive? Are you thinking about those kind of issues?
Sure, and so in that guide, it does talk about how the salary adjusts based on, what is considered kind of your duty station. And so if you are designated as remote, you are in that location, not necessarily where your kind of headquarters office is located. And so that's how your salary gets determined. But we're also thinking about opportunities outside of salary of, like, how do you build community in like a joint federal workspace with lots of different agencies. So, there is this piece around how do you have the collaboration and camaraderie that I do think people want and want to have some time in the office. We've been talking about it as a hybrid work environment.
OPM suffered 2 cyber attacks, actually 6 years ago in 2015. It compromised the data of millions of current, former, even prospective federal employees. What protections are in place now to make sure something like that doesn't happen again?
It's an important question. I think if anything, probably more so than at that time, 6 years ago, you have the entire community within the federal government really kind of, involved in how to protect cyber attacks across the government. I think if anything, OPM was a bit of that lesson of what needs to be in place. We have a cyber EO that's been set out by the president. We have a pretty robust working group and the organization that's really happening. We have new agencies being set up to manage this. And certainly for OPM, I mean, what it did do is really put us ahead of others, of the kinds of security protections we need to have in place, the kind of cyber education, the security tools, incident response. I mean, all of that has been put in place during that time. I actually came in literally right after the data breaches because of what happened.
As Chief of Staff.
As Chief of Staff, and that was kind of my orientation to the agency, which was...
But you're confident now that this kind of data can't be stolen again?
Listen, I can speak with as much confidence as we can with the protections we have in place, but I think we are fully aware of the challenges that are still in front of us, which is we still sit on legacy systems. That is what Congress has talked about. That's why we have the new modernization fund, to be able to modernize across the federal government. But until that happens, until we really become cloud-based, the technology in government, we're always going to feel a little behind with those cyber attacks. They become robotic and they've become much more sophisticated. So again, the idea is, and we have a new CIO, incredible, who came in a couple of years ago and now has become our permanent CIO. Part of that is bringing in the leadership, also making sure we have the set of skills with the individuals that we have within our CIO shop, as well as in other agencies. So I think, again, the federal government has to manage both the kind of technology we need, the support of Congress to do that, and the individuals have the skills to help us move off of these older systems to what is the modern security systems.
Well, speaking of IT and cyber,
right.
The federal government is hiring cyber professionals, IT professionals. That's a big part of OPM's mission.
Absolutely.
Is there anything new and innovative that you're doing to attract new talent into the government?
Absolutely. I mean, that is going to be my priority while as OPM director. And I think that there is, we've had this, I think, marketing branding challenge. I'm being on TV talking about that, is that, we win on mission when it comes to federal government. I mean, there's amazing work that is happening. I mean, we just, put out a vaccine, and I don't know how many months, unprecedented. And I think we forget to really tout that the mission-oriented aspect of federal government, and that is what I think early career talent, young people, are really interested in. They're driven by the difference that they can make. I know when I was coming out of law school, the only place I wanted to be was working in the federal government, and I came through a feeder program, the honors program at the Department of Justice, and so that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to contribute. I felt like it was my civic duty. So we want to make sure that there is that pathway. So a couple of things that we've been doing is we've recently issued a couple of regulations, what we call hiring authorities. I guess that's government speak, but it's basically a pathway to bring in more interns. We've dropped our intern numbers drastically, and also recent graduates that we just released recently, which is just a much faster way to bring individuals early in their careers, and the fact that you can make up to $72,000, whether you're a student full-time or a recent grad. I mean, this is also about government jobs are good paying jobs. So not only can you do something that's fulfilling, it is something that really is building your career for years to come.
It's only 8%, less than 8% of the federal workforce is under 30. That's a serious issue with bringing in young people. But on the other side, you're also trying to bring back retired workers back into the federal government. Tell me about that.
So, we did early on also issue what we call like a rehire regulation, which is, why should individuals who've gone out into the private sector be penalized for being out there and coming back in and being at the same grade versus like they actually had experience when they were outside to come. So, there's efforts that we have underway to really encourage those who've left, who have the institutional knowledge that we need in the federal government. We have a major mandate with the passage of the Infrastructure Jobs Act. There was already significant hiring, Mimi, in the government. Now, with the mandate and the kind of work that needs to happen, OPM is leading that charge around surge hiring across the federal government. And we actually see this as an opportunity to pull in early career talent in this effort. It is building back better inside the federal government.
You're the first Asian American woman to lead the OPM. What about recruiting people of color and adding diversity into the workforce?
Absolutely, absolutely. OPM, as a part of our expanded mandate, the OPM has had some trying times, not just the data breaches, but faced an imminent merger, in the last administration. And so I think, we're really trying to lean into the work that we're doing across the federal government, early career talent, supporting surge hiring. And absolutely, we're taking the lead on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I think, we know this is tried and tested in the private sector, that your workforce should reflect the diversity of this country because it only benefits the work that you do. And so there's a lot of efforts in place that we are focused on, and we see this focus on early career talent as a way to really increase the diversity in the federal government.
How are you coordinating with other agencies on that? I want to ask you especially about GSA, because they have a program called the U.S. Digital Corps. How does that work?
So it's a fellowship program, a 2-year fellowship program. It is their effort, to bring in early career talent. I think one thing we're realizing is that the federal workforce is aging, generally speaking, and that includes the IT personnel. And so we want to be able to, again, bring them in and really attract them to exciting projects that are happening. So the first year is about 30 individuals who will come into this program. The response has been overwhelming. And so I would dare say that we absolutely need to be expanding that program, because the demand, the interest, is a direct pipeline into these positions. And so I think right now, as we're starting off, there's a little bit of an imbalance of the level of excitement and interest and the number of positions that we have as we pilot this program. But the idea is to really build on that effort.
I want to circle back to what we were talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. That's a big push for the administration. But during your confirmation hearing in the Senate, you got a little bit of pushback on that because some senators wanted to make sure that you were still focused on merit-based hiring.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that again, diversity, equity, and inclusion, when it's talked about in all sectors, is really considered a good business practice. I don't see how you stay competitive, how you bring in the experiences that just make you a better functioning organization without tapping into all experiences. And if you look at the executive order the president signed in late June, that really is a mandate across government, it is looking at diversity in a very wide sense. We're talking about veterans, we're talking about individuals in rural populations, we're talking about the formerly incarcerated. Again, there is a race and ethnicity angle, but it's so much more. It's individuals with disabilities. So I think, again, one of my priorities also, Mimi, is the federal government should be a model employer. And I think, frankly, we are a bit behind the ball game when I see what's happening in the private sector around diversity, equity, inclusion. So again, one perfect example is, DC, we are the capital of unpaid internships. Yeah. And one way of kind of leveling the playing field is that asking agencies going forward that all internships are paid, because not every young person can afford to work for free, nor should they. So,
yeah. I agree with you on that. So how's the vaccine mandate going? Because, the deadline for that second shot or the last shot has passed. That was November 8th. How many people missed it? What does it look like?
Well, Mimi, I think one thing we can all agree on is that we all want to get past this pandemic. And we know the best tool in our toolbox is the vaccine. And that's what we're seeking to do. We know we cannot bring back and have a safe work environment without getting as many federal workers vaccinated. And so that's the effort that's taking place right now. It is, again, I use this word model employer a lot. We have, both being the largest employer in this country, as well as, I think, not only a public duty, a moral duty to be positioning ourselves and saying, listen, we need to create a safe work environment. This is for the efficient administration of government, for the public health, not only for our workers, but for their families and communities. And the president is doing everything he can to ensure that we can get ourselves back on track. So, and that's taking place across agencies. They are collecting the attestations, the documentation. They're still in the midst of determining who's requesting accommodations. And so we're going through that process. But what I can tell you, DOD, Department of Defense, was ahead of us as far as the requirement. And just in a short time, they've gone to 96% of their active military personnel are vaccinated.
I mean, the vaccination rates are definitely going up in the federal government, but there are some people that are refusing. So what happens? Are they going to get fired?
This effort is really about getting individuals vaccinated. We are not in the job of removing people from their positions. I've just been talking with you for the past, I don't know how many minutes, about wanting people to come into the federal government, and we need all these individuals in their seats. So the idea is that there's a lot of flexibility built into the system. There are those deadlines because we need to drive towards those deadlines. We also know that the numbers start to tick up as you get closer to those deadlines. But there's a lot of flexibility. The education and counseling effort is there to encourage people to get vaccinated. You've even seen in some cases, even when individuals have been suspended, as soon as they want to go and get their vaccine, all of that pauses. So this is really about driving more of the vaccination numbers, getting people vaccinated so we can get back to work.
Well, you were sworn in June as the director, and I can sense your passion about federal workers. What have you been most proud of so far?
I think we haven't talked as much about this, and I do just really want to share. This is the only place I wanted to be when asked to come back into the federal government. I served in the Obama administration for almost the entire time. I had no plans to come back to serve in another administration. Not that I wouldn't want to, but it just was not, I guess, on my radar. And when I was asked to step up and to lead this agency, it's absolutely where I want to be because of what this agency has gone through, the kind of role that we can play. This is the moment for workers, and I would even say for HR, because we are redefining what work is, and we need an agency like OPM to be front and center. It's an amazing group of individuals in that agency. I care deeply about every single person in that agency and the work that they do. And that translates to how deeply we care about the federal workforce and how important they are to the work that we do in this country.
Kiran, thank you so much.
Thank you
for the work that you do, and thank you for coming by and talking to us.
Thank you.